This is a presentation on inventing tips. It's a much shorter version. I do have a 10-hour course on it. I hope you will enjoy it. So this is the outline. I'll talk a little bit about myself and about the mistakes that I do, and then I'll talk about tips for inventing in your fields, and then I'll give a few general inventing tips. I did my PhD in Carnegie Mellon under my trick and helped Simon, who has both the Turing Award and the Nobel Prize. I started in IBM research in 1996, and I became an IBM master inventor. As an IBM master inventor, my job was to help other people invent, and this was about a third of my title, a third of my work time. In 2010, I quit, and I wasn't sure what it is that I'm going to do next. And somebody suggested that I'll become an inventor for hire. And there was this company that that paid me for my next 10 ideas before I invented them. It was called Intellectual Ventures. So I figured I could actually work as an inventor. And people started coming to me to invent for them for startups and for smaller companies. So far, I've sold 60 ideas. I have 175 granted USA patents, of which about 20 are mine and most belong to customers. I help client invents. Companies would come to me and ask me to invent something that would raise their value, either in a specific field or they'll just tell me what they do, and I will invent a next story for them. I also consult on patent strategies, as I've been doing. I've been in the area of patents for a long time. And some actual people came to me and they wanted me to invent their next startup, and this also there's an example. So the first thing I want to say about inventing is most people actually lose money in inventing. So there is no reason for you to make the mistakes that other people do. For example, my first invention was about invisible printing. It was in 1993. And the university decided it had no value, so I got to pursue it myself. And I made many mistakes. I'm not going to talk about them here. It's not the goal of this talk. But I've made many mistakes. And the result was that while the entire printing industry is using it, and the value of the invention as an invention could be in the 9 figures, I made very little money out of it. Those are common mistakes, well known in the field. If you're going to be inventing, if you're going to put your money into inventions, if you're going to have a company that is value its invention, do take the time to figure out what are the common mistakes and don't make them yourself. So what about inventing in a new field? How would you invent in a field you're not an expert in? So when I left IBM in 2010, as I said, there was this company that was willing to pay me for my next 10 inventions, and I had to invent them. Now, as I was an IBM master inventor, I wanted to invent in something which was not my field. So IBM will not be able to say I invented it while in IBM. My field was software engineering. I thought, what is it that I know things about? And I know things about Judaism. I've never been able to invent in that. But I also know things about dancing. One of my hobbies is dancing. I dance a lot, the Argentine tango and other dances. And I thought, what is it that I know how to do when I'm dancing? And it turned out that what you're doing, when you think about it, in a social dancing as a leader, which is my role as a man, what you do is lead. You tell people, you instruct people with very little force, otherwise you're considered a beginner, how it is that they should walk. And how is that useful? Well, another place where people instruct people how to go is for blind people. There are 2 methods for blind people to get around. The first one is the stick or any instrument that will tell them about the environment. The second one is the dog. Those are very, very smart dogs. And you can tell the dog, take me to the supermarket, and as long as the dog knows where the supermarket is, they understand the command, it will take you to the supermarket. I thought, well, maybe I can do better than this 100-year-old idea. And the first thing that happened was that I went to see how dogs actually are being trained. And I thought one of the things that I could teach a dog is to lead a large steps. Those dogs are extremely smart. They do all sorts of things. So I said I could teach them the simplest thing in dancing, which is leading a large step, which would be very useful for leading a man, because instead of walking around the banana, you can walk over it like a seeing person would do. But as they knew that I came from dancing, they thought I was trying to teach the dogs how to dance, so they didn't take me up on my idea. So this Japanese company came up with this idea that they would have a robot dog, and the robot dog would be able to lead the person. And the advantage of the robot dog over a real dog is that it can read the map, and it can look in the GPS, and you can say, take me to a place that it was not trained to take you to. For example, take me to Yehuda 86, and it would look in the GPS, and it would find the relevant buses, and it would take you there by looking at the right buses coming, and so forth and so on. And this could work, but they're actually spending a lot of money on solving the wrong problem, because the blind person can walk. The only issue is the guidance. So we don't need the robot itself. We just need the sensors. And then we need to tell the person how to walk, which I did with ideas from dancing, with a belt that would tell him how to walk, using all sorts of ideas that would make the walking much more accurate than just direction. And for example, we took a person and we had her walk in a restaurant between the tables, like a seeing person would do, using this guided technique. And also we used the guided technique to guide the hands, and could guide a person to go pick fruits. So you can guide not specifically the legs, you can guide the hands when you're walking. Guiding the hands is actually easy. You just say, you don't say, well, you signal forward or backward, left or right, down or up. And then if you're next to a touch screen and there is a red button there which you want to touch, instead of saying touch the red button and then the blind person cannot touch it, you go forward, down, forward, left, left, touch, and then you can get the person. So this way I could look at my hobby, and I actually came up with 8 ideas that are related to my hobbies. And it's something that I learned in my hobby, how to lead, and I said it's useful in another field. Another thing which is common in tango is a situation where you want to invite a woman to dance. And the way you do it is they clear the floor between sets of dancers, which I call tandas. And when the music starts, you know that you want to invite a woman to dance. And what you do is you try to catch her eye. And if you catch her eye and you look at her for 2 or 3 seconds, which is not natural in normal surrounding, then you bob your head. And if she does, then she agreed to dance with you. And then you walk to her and invite her to dance. And if she does not, of course, then you didn't successfully invite her to dance. So this is the protocol for inviting to dance, which is actually a lot more complicated than that, but that's the basic. And I thought, is it useful in any other surrounding where 2 people agree from a distance using their eyes? And the other surrounding in which this could be useful is assume that they have augmented reality glasses, which means, among other things, that the glasses can see where I'm looking so they can add information in the right place. So my glasses know where I'm looking, and she has augmented reality glasses, or he has augmented reality glasses, and he knows where he's looking. And if both of us are looking at each other, and we do the protocol, basically look at each other for a few seconds, what the glasses would do is start a phone conversation between us. So for example, if you're in a party and we want to talk and we can't talk because we are 3 meters apart, which is too far to talk in a loud party, then the glasses would initiate a phone conversation and then we can talk. This is another example of learning something and then using it in a different context. Yet another example. So there are people who inspect your luggage and to try to see if you're trying to sneak a bomb in it or a gun or whatever. And the problem that you have is how to keep them vigilant. The problem is that most people don't sneak bombs or guns. And even if they sneak a gun, it usually is just to get it to the other side. It's not specifically to hijack the plane. So if the person is sleeping on the job, basically nothing would happen. It's a once in a lifetime occurrence or once in a few years occurrence. And how do you keep him vigilant? How do you make sure that he looks? If he doesn't look, nothing bad happens to him. So the idea was, the company came up with the idea is that when you take a picture of the luggage, you see it on your screen, sometimes they would add to the picture a gun. The gun is not in the luggage, it just added it to the luggage to look like there's a gun there. But what it does is that because this happens every 20 or 30 bags, you have to keep vigilant, because if you don't stop and check if it's a real gun, there is a button that say, is it real? If you don't do that, then your supervisor every 2 minutes or 3 minutes will catch you. So you have to be really careful, because every 20 or 30 bags, there is something there and you have to look for it. So I thought this is a really smart idea. And then I found another use for it in software engineering. And the place I found the use for it was when the computer asks you a question to see that you've done a test, and you have to, instead of saying yes, yes, you're correct, sometimes you give a question to which the answer is you're incorrect, what the computer is giving you as comments, and that makes sure that you're on your toes. In a sense, think about spell checkers, that it tells you you have to change something to something, and sometimes he would put the wrong word, not the wrong spelling, because you might not catch it, but actually the wrong word. And if you don't catch it, then it tells you, well, you have not been using the spell checker correctly. When I was in Buenos Aires, I was being interviewed to the newspaper. And well, now it's the World Cup time, so Messi is still up there. Just now before the half final, he just passed the quarterfinal, so I don't know what will happen next. Playing Morocco, I think. Well, in any case, a common situation is when you watch football at home and you want to tell the players what to do, so you shout at them and tell them what to do, but they ignore you because it's on your TV. And the question is, how can you get them to do what it is that you want them to do, because you have great suggestion? So my idea was that when you want to tell the players what to do, is you press the button and then you see the game twice. Okay, when you see the game twice, nothing very exciting happened. You just see the game twice. But when you actually want to tell them what you want them to do, one of the games would turn into a computer game. And what you do is, in this computer game, you would have all the players in the same situation as in the real game, the ball in the same situation, and the referee in the same situation. And you will start playing one of the players. And then, of course, the two games will now no longer be the same games. One of them is the game that is really happening, and the other one is the one that you're playing. So after 30 seconds, maybe you come back to the games that you are playing, and can now later, when the game ends, you can ask which Messi is smarter, mine or the real one. So when I was interviewing in Buenos Aires, this was the headline of this interview. And it says that Shmuel Ur is an Israeli scientist who can control the movement of Lionel Messi, which is, of course, nothing of the sort, but they thought it would sell papers. So the first tip was, you take a field that you know or understand something and try to see, you found out a new idea, you just saw something smart happening. Is it relevant someplace else? The second tip for inventing a new field is to invent actual new problems. And if you invent new problems, you're in a really good situation, because you will be the first one to solve them, and then any solution will be a patent and will be very valid. So I'm going to give an example from augmented reality. So in the phone, we have a shop, and in the shop you have applications, and you have probably 5 million applications you can buy on your phone. And think about augmented reality, and the augmented reality application, will call them a skin, and there'll probably be a few millions of them also in a few years. Once you have the devices out there, people will write augmented reality application or skins. So what can a skin look like? For example, you might have a number of skins for GPS navigation. And this is an example here. You follow the blue line, or it could be a horse running ahead of you, or a virtual car. or just a mark on the road where you're supposed to go. There'll be signs of information of all sorts of things, telling you what it is that you might want to know, where is the gas light, where you can change money, where the good food is. A restaurant, instead of having a sign in the real world, we have some signs in the virtual world, which might be dependent on what it is that you're interested in. Of course, you're driving in Russia and you don't know Russian, so you see everything in English. Those things already exist. It's not a question of whether they will exist or not. And you have a shop. And the problem is that this shop is very different than the skin shops, than the application shops that you have now. Why is it different? So the skins are actually not independent. It's not like you have two skins, they don't have to consider each other. So what's the situation that we are talking about, which we're going to invent in? So we assume people have augmented reality glasses, otherwise they can't see the world with augmented reality information that people put there for them. And you have tens of skins which are always active, doing all sorts of things. Some of them are just, for fun. So today all the cars are Rolls Royces, but some of them are serious. The skins may complement each other. So one skin would change something, like say you change a cat to a dog, and the second skin would add a hat to the dogs. So if you do them in that order, you change a cat to a dog with a hat. Or you add some information, and on that information, you add additional information. They will work on each other. So the order is important. So if you have one skin that change cats to dogs and another skin that change cat to foxes, if the first one is first, then you'll see dogs, and if the second one second, you see foxes, and they will not interact with each other. But the order could be important. You can see other examples where they interact with each other. So for example, in the example that I gave before, where you had hats, if the hats happen before the change, then you don't have the hat. If you change the cat to a dog and then dog to hats, you have a dog with a hat from a cat. But if the hat is added first, you have a cat, you don't add a hat to it, and then the cat is changed into a dog. So the order is important. So what we can see here, that skin store is not equal to an app store. And therefore, we have new things we can invent there if we can figure out good problems. So what are the problems? We talked about the order. You need to apply the skins in different order. So currently, when you buy an app, they don't ask you which order you need to put that. But now when you buy a skin, it will say, well, it's 53 or 87, and you don't know how to handle that. So we need to solve the problem. We have a problem. Solving it is a patent, an invention, and invention is something we can. Everything has to be effective in real time. Otherwise, if you take too much time, more than 1/20th of a second for all of them together, they're not done in time and they're not on the real world, and it confuses people. So let's assume that you have 80 skins and you don't have enough processing power to run all of them in real time. And you can do maybe 20 or 30 of them, depend on which. So how do you choose which is the ones that you do? How do you run skins efficiently? For example, if you have two skins that are detecting cats, maybe you want to do the detection of the cats at one time, and then tell the skin, operate the skin only if there is a cat in the picture. So maybe you want a framework that does all the object recognition and then decide which skin to run and which skins do not to run. And the skins register on objects, and they happen only if those objects are in the picture. You want to be able to test and debug because there are all sorts of problems that will happen there. So how do you test and debug in this specific situation? And you want to be able to write skin for non-programmers. For example, you want to be able to say, take this object and change its color to blue. And this is something that a non-programmer can do if there's the right framework for that. So we saw all sorts of problems. And if you solve them, well, then you have patents. And in this case, I thought about the problems. I designed how it would work. I created 8 different ideas and I solved them. Okay, so we talked about driving with your AR on, but that's not good enough. What about, can you drive with your augmented reality off? Well, if it really works, I mean, works well enough that you see somebody and you don't know if he's here or in the augmented reality, then you have applications that you need. Some of them you don't need. You don't need the one that change dog to cats, but you need the translation, and you need the GPS, and you need the information. So you actually will have hard time moving around without augmented reality. Like, in a sense, you have hard time moving around without the phone now because, for example, you might not know how to get to your destination. Okay, so we have hard time driving with augmented reality on, but can you drive with augmented reality off? With off, can you drive with it on, or is it dangerous? How can somebody attack you with augmented reality? So what happens if the augmented reality applications that what it does, what you thought it does is it makes the color of the sky blue, also in your street raises kids that run into the road. This could lead into an accident. Or it put an imaginary kids that run into the road to make you swerve and do an accident. And those two are malicious, but it could be just a bug. For example, if you decided that the roads today are covered with grass and there is a pothole and it covered with grass, then you drive into the potholes because you don't see it. And it wasn't malicious, but it was a bug and it was an accident. So how do you make sure that augmented reality doesn't cause problems that did not exist before? How do you protect yourself? So I'm not going to talk about my solution. And likely you probably can get to my solution. When I asked people, about 50% were able to get to the solution. But the valuable thing was the question. So when I came up with the question, when I solved it, I had some property I could sell, which was the patent about how to solve a specific problem. So those were about inventing in fields in general. And now I'll talk about inventing in fields that are new to you. Also, problems are also good in fields that are not new to you, but specifically, if you come into new fields, looking at them with fresh eyes is useful. Now I'm talking about general inventing tips, and the first one is to use magic. So I'll give an example. I'll be talking about eye tracking. So eye tracking software exists, hardware and software exist. You can eye track with the camera of the laptop. You can eye track with specific devices which are better. And most people are not trained to control their saccades, which is the movement of the eye. So the first questions that I received when I became a general inventor, somebody asked me to find out people that are lying in the airport. And finding people that lie is difficult because first, it's a known problem, so it's nothing new about it. Many people are looking at it. And second, people are well trained in lying. So I thought I'll try to solve another problem. And the problems that I try to solve is that when you look at somebody, do you actually know that person or not? And this was useful in the sense for security, they show you a person which is a criminal, and if you know him, maybe they need to question you more. So this way they can show you a person and just by looking at your eyes, see if you know them or not. And the way I thought that I could do that was I've read an article in psychology, which says that if you look at a person that you know, you look more at the inside of the face. And if you look at a person that you don't know, then you look more on the outside of the face. And then I said, I'll look at the way you look at people and see if you know them or not. And we actually had a startup starting. And we had a slight problem, which was we couldn't recreate the data that was in this paper. And 5 years later, it turned out that nobody could recreate it because it was just not true. You look the same way at people that you know and people that you don't know. Okay, so my startup is not doing well. And I still want to solve the problem. So I'm thinking about it and I come up with a different idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two people and ask you if it's the same person or not. This is the task that I'm giving you to do. So now let's assume that you're not trying to lie. And I'm looking at your eyes. If you know them, then you look at the person on the right and you say, this is Shmuel. And you look at the person on the left and you say, this is not Shmuel. And you say, not the same. Or Shmuel and Shmuel is the same if you know at least one of the pictures. And then looking at your eyes, I basically see you look at one place and identify the person, this is Shmuel, and no reason to look at it again, and look at the second place, and that's it. If you don't know them and still not lying, what you do is you jump with your eyes from one to the other and say, okay, nose is the same, eyes are the same, left eye is the same, mouth is the same, almost the same, yeah. So there's a very big difference in the pattern of the eyes when you know them and when you don't know them, if you're not trying to lie. If you're trying to lie, there are two ways. One of them is you don't know them and you say that you know them. But that's not interesting because I'll ask you who it is and you don't know. So the only interesting case is you lie and you know them and you're trying to make your eyes behave as if you don't know them. So jumping from one to another. And previously, before 2015, I would have to write an algorithm and solve this problem, and it would be really difficult. But what I can do now, which is the magic, which is artificial intelligence, I would look at the patterns of people who know and the people who lie, and the people who don't know and the people who lie, and see if those patterns are the same. And it turns out that people are not trained in controlling the eyes. So if you actually know the people, your eyes jump in a different ways than if you don't know them. And therefore, I can tell them apart without actually writing the algorithm. I'm just saying I'm using a classifier. And it works. It actually works in practice too. The second example of using this magic is somebody asked me to write a patent for companies that does remote learning. So I said, okay, what about remote testing? So in remote testing, the problem is that somebody might be lying. And how do you know that there is nobody else? Well, the first lies that he could have is somebody take the test instead of him. But that's not difficult. What you do is with the camera, you can do biometrics and see that he is actually the one taking the test. But how do you know that nobody is sitting next to him and telling him what to reply? So you can look around the room, but it's very difficult. It's his room. So what I want to do is actually claim that he's the one thinking about the solution, that he actually understands the question, that he understands the solution. And what we can do in this case is look at the movement of the eyes as he looks at the question. And people who understand the question will concentrate on different topics than people who don't understand the questions. And if he looks at, the class that belongs to is people that don't understand the question, and he still answers correctly, then what I would do is ask him to take the exam under controlled conditions. Now, it could be that he is a different sort of person. He thinks differently. I'm not saying that he actually lying. I don't know. But I don't know that he belongs to the class of people who actually understand the question. Therefore, I would like to check it out again. And my last tip for this talk is to don't stop with your first solution. So I'll give an example. So I was approached to ask what we can do with trucks that is not done today. And I thought, well, maybe I can use the roofs of the trucks for something useful. And my idea was to put landing pads for drones on roofs of trucks. And then if drones currently have a problem of range, they cannot usually go more than 15 kilometers. So if you want to go from, say, Tel Aviv to Netanya, which is 30 kilometers apart, what the drone would do is ask the controller, is there a truck going in the general direction? And if there's a truck going in the general direction and it is free for him, he would jump on the truck, get power as he's taking the ride. When he gets to Netanya, he gets off the truck and go to wherever it wants to go. So if I want to send a lunchbox from Tel Aviv to Netanya, then I'll be able to do that. And of course, there are many problems, and we solve them. But this was the general idea. And now, okay, I'm happy with that. But the questions that you have to ask yourself is when that's a bad idea, when that does not work. So what happened if you want to go to send the package from Chicago to New York? You can still do the same idea, but in addition to having the package go from Chicago to New York, you have the drone going to Chicago to New York, and then you have to get it back. It's your drone that's going places. This is like, instead of having software that tells you how to get to places, you go on the bus and so forth. This is the same for drone, but you don't want the drone to go there, you just want the package to go there. So what you could do is have another solution for trucks that are going to different places, to places that are far away. And what they would do there is they would have a small storage facility on the roof, and then the drone will come, put the package in the storage facility, go away, and when it gets to New York, another drone would come and will take the package and continue it on its route. And this way, you're not wasting the time of the drone for all that long distance. And of course, you can also send a lot more because you can take a lot more packages that you can take drones. Packages are smaller. So I hope you enjoyed my talk. And if you have any questions, I'm sure you'll be able to find out how to contact